Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome back to today's press conference. I know we took 1 week off due to the hurricane that came through the area. We're excited to get back on our normal weekly schedule here. So, preparing for Mercer this week, who's coming off a 30-23 victory over Sanford last weekend. So, heading down there to Macon, Georgia for a 4 p.m. kickoff. Here to talk about that game and everything that's been going on with the team is head coach Brent Thompson.
Thank you, John. Certainly it's good to be back. Good to be back in somewhat of a routine. We spent the last 7 days, for the most part, idle, just kind of waiting to see what happened. Fortunately, it was good to see that we were able to keep the game on with Charleston Southern. It was both important to me as it was to Charleston Southern, I think, to be able to get the game at least on schedule, and maybe not if one of us makes the playoffs. But certainly was an important game for the city of Charleston, for both schools. So we worked vigorously to try to get that thing done, and I was happy to see that we got it done in such a short amount of time. That was good to see. For both players and both teams and both schools, I think it's a good rivalry game that both of us wanted to see come back on the schedule after a couple of years off. For the most part, we spent the last 7 days off. As I said, we didn't do any practicing. We practiced a week ago on Sunday. We got back a little bit yesterday. We went out there for a few periods yesterday and got knocked a little bit of the rust off. But as we quickly found out, it's you lose a little bit of your conditioning, you lose a little bit of your fundamentals, and you've got to start with that moving forward before you can get any further. So I think that's what we've got to start with our game planning for Mercer. Mercer's a good football team. We watched them against Sanford. We watched them live on TV against Sanford. I thought they had a terrific game plan, both offensively and defensively. They kept the ball in front of them for the most part on defense. They changed up the play calls. I thought they ran it very efficiently on a very good Sanford defense, and then took their shots down the field and nickel and dimed a couple of other pass plays throughout the game. But I thought they kept them off balance with both the run and the pass. Found themselves a nice quarterback. I think the quarterback threw very efficiently, controlled the offense. Didn't look like a young kid at all. I thought he was looked more of an experienced player, more of the John Russ that they had for a couple of years ago. Big, good-looking offensive line up front, and they were able to run the football pretty efficiently. So we've got our work cut out for us, but as I told our guys, if you want to get yourself back on the Southern Conference map, this would be a good one to get for us. And I thought we came out and we were fresh yesterday. Our fundamentals weren't quite there. Our conditioning was a little bit down. But I do think that with the freshness of our legs, we've got very little injuries. We are working away just about 100% back with everybody. I think that this could be a good football game for us to kind of break out. The Chattanooga game was, if you weren't a fan of either team, I thought it was a very good football game. It was fought all the way to the end. But as I told the guys at the end, you got to find a way to win those games. You got to find a way to win those games when they're that tight. Wins and losses are tough to come by. But if you can get one of those, it'll kind of propel you forward. So I think that's one game that we've got to be able to win throughout the year. It was, unfortunately, is another one of those games where we got behind early. We've got to get off to a faster start. We'll look to do that this week, of course. The big plays got us again on defense, and the turnovers got us on offense. We hadn't been turning the ball over too much in the Wofford game, so that snuck up and killed us in a couple of drives between the penalties and the turnovers. Other than that, I thought the offense improved greatly. Defensively, we had our good drives in the second half where we stopped them and were able to put some momentum together in the third quarter. I thought we had some good fresh legs in the fourth quarter, but when it came down to it, we just needed one more play, and unfortunately they got it and we didn't. So that's the way it goes. That's why we play the game, and we'll move forward from here. And unfortunately, we didn't get an opportunity to play our game last week. But, you got to sit on that loss for another week. So we're happy to get back at it this week, and we're excited to get at Mercer and take off at 4 o'clock on Saturday. Questions?
Brent, you just mentioned it a little bit there. Just how hard was it kind of sitting on your hands, especially after losing the way you did against Chattanooga?
Not only was it difficult just sitting on your hands, but sitting on your hands and you can't do anything about it. You can't practice. You can only game plan so much. I went in a couple of days and game planned it, but you got to be careful of over game planning too, and you got to be careful of over game planning on the bye week. Just the same as when you don't have players to be able to go out there and work with. It's a completely different scenario, something that we've never been used to. We've never had more than a day off on a bye week during the regular year. Here you are, you had five 5 days off is probably what it ended up being. We came back to work on Sunday, and our players came back in on Monday. But other than that, it was a lot of sitting around on your hands and just watching every single football game out there just to try to occupy your mind and time. We saw some good football, and we saw some not so good football.
Was there any consideration of trying to keep the team together like you've done in past years so you could practice?
We did, and we definitely considered it. We definitely considered keeping the game on. And what was challenging about it was we couldn't go up to Ladson and play because it was going to be about the same weather up there, we thought. So Coach Tucker and I spoke, and we both thought it was in the best interest of both teams. And when you're responsible for 120 and his 120 guys or so, we've got to make sure that we're doing what's in the best interest of the safety of both football teams. So we both discussed it and said, let's try to reschedule this one. We're fairly close to one another. We should probably be able to handle that. So we both decided in the best interest of both programs that we would go ahead and forego any other discussion about playing at another neutral site.
Brett, how would you assess the play of your four grad transfer guys on defense?
They're adequate. Right now they are about what we would like them to be, where they are depth role players for us. They play a lot of special teams for us. I certainly didn't bring all of them in here with the notion that they were going to be superstars. I brought them in here to be guys that are going to be role fillers for us, stop gaps at some positions where we were light at. But I do think that, there's guys in there taking 16 to 20 reps in a football game, and we need that right now in some of those positions. And when you lose guys at a certain position due to injury or just due to not coming back to play football anymore, you need to fill them as soon as you possibly can with a more experienced guy than what you have on the roster, and that was the best way to do it this year.
Is that something you see more of in the future?
I say more of, maybe I think we would still limit it to maybe the 4, no more than 5. I think beyond that it starts to get a little bit too much if we can limit ourselves to 4 or 5, because we still have to be a developmental roster. We can't be a roster of a Chattanooga or somebody that has 26 and 25 on it, including some junior college transfers. That's not going to be us at any point. We've got to be a developmental roster at all times.
Do you get much blowback from veteran Citadel people that don't like the idea of these guys coming in, that haven't gone through the cadet stuff?
Very little. Very little. It all depends on what your expectations are for them. If I brought in which may happen in the future, but if I brought in a 5th-year transfer quarterback or something, that's a different story. That's kind of the spotlight of the football team. That's a little bit of a developmental role for us. But when you're asking guys to come in and just kind of be feeder guys for us, be 16 to 25 play rep guys for us, I think that's a little bit different in the eyes of all of our alumni.
Just what kind of a disadvantage does it put you at when you take that type of a break, or is there a strength even to the fresh legs you mentioned? Like, how much of a challenge is this to get back in game mode and play Mercer Saturday?
Well, I'll probably let you know a little bit more by the end of the year, but I'll tell you this, is when I watched the film yesterday, things go quickly. Your conditioning goes and your fundamentals go quickly. Whether they quickly return will probably be determined by the end of the week for us. But, yeah, we were a lot fresher out there. We were a lot quicker. We were moving around fairly good. Now, whether we were going in the right spot or whether we were doing the right things was a different story. But it certainly was. It was interesting. I didn't know what I was going to get out there. I probably got what I expected, a little bit of this and a little bit of that. But we need to be a lot better. I also got to keep in mind it was only Monday. Today will be a lot better. And we also got to keep in mind that our game plan is fairly large. We've got to shrink our game plan and keep it simple for our guys, being that we just have a quicker, short week, essentially, to be able to get our guys ready to go.
Did you ask the guys to do anything, follow a program of any sort while they were?
The only thing we asked them to do was just to try to get out and run, but unfortunately a lot of them were in the same area that we were. We had a couple of nice days, and we did get some guys actually video themselves in some good weather being able to run around, but I think that was a little bit of a pipe dream on my end too. I think there's some reality involved in it too. They get a chance to get out here and go visit their buddies at some other schools. That's what they're going to do.
How was this different than the Hurricanes you've had to deal with in the past, with the way that the team was separate and you didn't take them to camp? I know that was a bonding experience one year. I guess, how did this one come together differently than the others?
Well, it was there was a little, like I said, there was a little bit of discussion of that. It was very quick. We were probably just a couple of hours of whether we could play this and whether we could take the team. But unfortunately, there was just no – with the uncertainty of the storm, we didn't know that we could go anywhere safely. We figured south may be the best place to go, but then you got to plan something. We had already kind of figured Greenville. We'd already done that deal up there. We'd kicked that around a little bit, but there needed to be accommodations for really 2 sets of teams up there. And when Coach Tuck called me and said, look, the accommodations up there weren't going to be great for him, and so that was going to be difficult for us. So when we had the opportunity last year to go play Presbyterian at their place, that was just an easy fix. Okay, we're going to play it there. At least now we've got to figure out where we're going to stay. When you have 2 teams doing that, that becomes very problematic. Also, the timing of it is the last 2 years we were able to at least get a Sunday, Tuesday practice in. I think we left on a Wednesday the first year. When you leave on a Sunday, when we don't practice on Mondays, you have very little prep time. And if you go off-site to practice someplace, you don't have all of the resources that you need on campus. That factored in as well. That becomes a safety issue for your players as to where you're going to practice and how well are you going to practice. And at that point, are you just getting a game in to get a game in when we can try to kick this thing down the road a little bit and make it special for our guys? So when you put it all together, that's how we ended up with that decision as opposed to the last couple of years.
Given what's happened the last 3 years, have you considered, or has there been any talk of a standard plan when a hurricane comes, take the team to this spot and keep them together?
We've talked about the traveler's rest plan. That was a standard plan. Now, what you got to understand about that plan is it maximizes and it probably overextends a lot of our resources. Over the last 2 years, we've spent a lot of money taking the team on the road for 4 and 5 days, and let's face it, that can be very expensive at times to feed and house close to 100 people, as well as the toll that it takes not only on your players, the players' families, but your coaches and coaches' family, as well as your support staff and their family. So, yeah, as we know what that plan is, we've discussed that plan, and unfortunately we keep on saying that we're not going to get a hurricane this year. I had actually gone into this year thinking that if we do get a hurricane, we're canceling. It just became very, very exhausting and expensive for us. So moving forward, we probably do need to have a little bit more of a plan. At least we've got an idea of where we can go and what we can do. But it also needs to be a timing thing where if we can get a couple of days of practice in, I think that'll help. And we know this thing's going to clear out. This was such a slow-moving storm that we didn't know where it was going to go. We didn't know how hard it was going to hit. Anyway, at one point, it was a Category 5. And at that point, it was everybody, let's get out of town and let's get to safety.
What surprised you about Mercer's win over Sanford?
Well, as I've been saying, and I've stood at this podium about 2 or 3 years during media day or at the beginning of campaign, there's going to be a time when Mercer kind of takes over this league. I've seen what they've recruited. They've got a great school. It's a good academic school. They've got a good coaching staff. Coach Lamb knows the conference well. They've been recruiting some really good football players. I knew at some point it was going to turn, and when they started getting full scholarship allotment into their program, this was naturally going to happen. So it didn't surprise me at all. I've always kind of picked them in the top 3 as to where that they could be. I think he's got a good football team this year. So it didn't surprise me at all. What did surprise me a little bit, Sanford got behind early and they played catch up most of the day. There were some things that I thought Mercer did early on, got a drive early on, scored, got the lead early on, kind of sat on the lead a little bit. Could have had a little bit more. They had a penalty leading into halftime, took 3 points and could have really had 7 points or somewhere right around the 5-yard line. So I thought if they had gotten the lead and sat on the lead a little bit because they can run the ball, that they could eke out a win there. And it turned out the game was a little bit closer at the end. They hit a big play on them in the fourth quarter. Mercer hits a big play on them, and then Sanford comes back. The thing about Sanford is that they can always strike quickly. It's just a matter of whether you can rally back or try to kill the clock on them.
Last thing, I promise. How much thought or how much discussion has there been about trying to maybe add a game in your bye week, or is that off the table completely if you're trying to get to that 7-win marker?
Yeah, no, I think we've kind of tabled that. I haven't had any discussions about it. It certainly has crossed my mind, but that bye week falls at a good time for us, and I don't know that I want to take that away from us either. Unfortunately, I don't want to go through another bye week, but we may need it to get some of our fundamentals back. So we've got Mercer, Towson, and then bye week for us. We probably need that time to practice and get ourselves back to where we were, and try to recover some of those 5 to 7 days that we lost. Coach.
Yeah, I was reading some of the stuff on the internet about last week's game where Coach Lamb went into the ball game saying that he wanted to control the clock, control the ball. keep it away from those guys because they're pretty talented. What do you think his mindset will be coming into playing a triple option team that also has a time management type? I mean, wants to control the ball. Do you think both of you will be trying to control the ball?
Well, you could approach it a couple different ways. Like Chattanooga, they were going to take their shots down the field. And they were going to quick strike you and then just try to hang on defense and just score quickly on you. But I think more conventional wisdom would be, just to try to keep it away from a grinding offense. But you also got to maximize possessions when you are. So when you get a team like Sanford or Chattanooga that can quick strike you, and you're trying to drive the football on them, if you can effectively drive the football on them, you may force them to take unnecessary shots and unnecessary risks, things that would be out of their game plan or things that they wouldn't normally do. And that's what we try to do, is we try to keep people a little bit out of their game plan and on our game plan. And some days it works and some days it doesn't. And then when you face a team like Wofford who does the exact same thing and we're both ball controlling each other and it's a 2-hour game, it's hard to get anybody out of their game plan then. But you saw what they did to us last year. They tried to quick strike us down the field, and they got a couple of easy touchdowns off of us last year. So it's interesting to see how this thing is going to play out. But more conventional wisdom would be to keep it away and maximize their possessions with time.
Looks like they're a spread team, but they're spread to be able to run.
I think he does a good job for a spread team. He does a good job of running. He does a little bit of RPO. He's got a little bit of counter game in there. He's got some zone read. He's mixed in all of the spread concepts as well. Now, keep in mind, it's a new offensive coordinator. So I think Coach Pizzo's done a good job of being able to mix up the run and the pass. All right, thank you guys.